This is a reed repair shop session. My students in the Invincible Oboist course get as part of their tuition, reed repair shop sessions at will. So one of my students has just sent me 3 reeds, and in this video, I work on them and talk about the differences between them, the similarities between them, and how she can do better. Even without joining the Invincible Oboist, you can take advantage of my reed repair shop service. You can find it on my website, jennetingle.com. I'm looking at your reeds, and it's interesting. They're really beautifully constructed. They all absolutely look like reeds. They're gorgeous on the plaque. Like, all of their measurements look exactly like I would expect a reed to look. And yet they really have 3 very different problems, as I'm sure you know. I'm going to start from the one that feels the worst to me and move toward the one that feels the best, and just see if I can help you find some things to grab onto. So this dark brown colored reed has, for me, 2 issues. One, the biggest, is that the opening of that reed feels enormous, and it's very, very hard for me to play it because it's so big and round. And I think that is probably caused by the crack that is just above the thread on both sides. It's as though the cane was too strong when you started to wind it up and it cracked. And I don't usually worry about a crack that appears like that just above the thread if it's not too dramatic. But because that crack is pretty well centered, and it's right on both sides, it's really causing your opening, which should be like this, to be like that, right? The crack there is acting as part of the spine and really strengthening the opening of that reed a ton. So I can see where you've scraped a lot out of the windows trying to get that the opening to settle down, but it didn't quite. And I can see where you've scraped a ton out of the tip trying to get that opening down, but it didn't quite. And the result that you ended up with is a little tiny bit chirpy. So I think there's a thin place in the tip, and for me it's a little bit hard to articulate on this reed. It has that sort of chirpy up quality sort of all the time. And I'm holding it together with my mouth to keep it from going wild. So there's a lot about this reed that is not working for me. So here's my thought. Because you've got already a strong spine, I can see it really visibly right there and right there. It's quite strong. And it's sort of right in the same place as the crack. What I'm going to try to do is settle this whole area down a little bit. I'm going to scrape a little bit right at that crack, directly over it, which I know we never scrape right in the middle of the reed, right? But I'm just going to try to get rid of that a little bit on both sides, so that hopefully that crack is no longer forcing the issue of the opening. And then I'm probably going to touch that spine a little bit, but before I do that, I want to make sure that we find where the thin place is in the tip that is causing it to chirp. And I think it is here on the left side on this blade, where you've gotten quite a strong cut in above the window, above the heart rather. And then over here on this side, like, this is nice and gradual, but then there's a big thin spot up here that kind of goes across and doesn't thin outward towards the side. So I'm just going to work on slope in this tip, having tried to settle the crack down a little bit. And the thing is, with these cracks, like, often they're really not a big deal. I mean, for me, all of the pieces of cane crack below the thread. And if they crack a tiny hair above the thread, I don't really cry about it. But this one seems to have really affected a lot. It's holding the reed open hard and causing you to have to scrape more than you wanted in a lot of places, I think. Which is how it got so weirdly thin in the tip. Okay, let's see what I just did. Between the crack in the bottom and the slope in the tip. Well, I seem to have gotten rid of the chirp. I'm not really feeling depth in this reed yet. I can get the low crow, but it's still a little bit edgy. Let me play it before I scrape more. So for me, actually, that is already better. It's still got a little bit of height to it that I don't like, and I'm tempted to work next at the sides of the heart to see if I can just settle this whole thing down even a little bit more. I know that reasonable people can disagree about the bark on the sides of the heart. I tend to take it off because I find that it gives me more depth in the sound, and I know that you don't, or at least you didn't, but let's just see what happens if we do that, because I'm not yet exquisitely happy with this reed. So I didn't do anything but the bark on the sides. And on this side where the heart feels heavier, I just arced it a little bit. Dropped the crow dramatically. Now I can clip. This reed feels a lot better. There's still just at the very, very top, like the high B flat and C, a little bit of openness, more than I would want in my reeds, and I think that's a thing that we could have found in the tip if we had caught it earlier on. I just think there's a little bit too much out right here and here, right above the heart, to be able to get real... to be able to get that slightly thicker quality up there that makes me personally feel safe. But this, I think, is a much nicer reed than it was before. So I'm going to set that aside and work on your next one. This red guy. It's funny, I measured it really, really hard over and over again, looking for it to be overwound, because it a little bit looks overwound. Like there's just something about the way the top of the thread is right there that looks like this reed is wearing a turtleneck sweater, and there's definitely something about the way it plays that makes me feel like it's overwound, but the ruler says that it is not, and I'm going to trust that you're on a 47mm tube and that that is not actually the problem. So here I am going to play this one. It's got a nice double crow, it's all there. And for me, it's really just right up in that upper part from about middle F on up, that the whole thing feels just a little bit compressed, as though I would really love to be able to blow more through it and get a ringier sound, and it just feels like it shrinks as I get up into that region. So the hypothesis I'm going to make, let me get a plaque in here and see. So I guess I would call that a quality of stuffiness a little bit. And normally for stuffiness, I look again at this kind of region, the slope in the tip, and ask myself whether the tip is sloping too slowly, which would of course be a dramatic contrast from what you did over here on this brown guy. And I mean, I do see that a little bit. There's a little bit of a halo of good stuff here above the roof. And I wonder if our issue is just that we just need a better compromise between this version and this version. But a little bit before I scrape, I want to experiment with taking a little more out right there behind the heart. Because I think of the windows as being about resonance, and because I want more resonance in this reed. Okay, I'm going to scrape just a little bit right behind. the heart and see if I can open the sound up there before I mess around with the slope in the tip, because I'm not positive that that's what it is, and I like this tip compared to that tip so much. So you can see that I'm really not taking much. I'm mostly just sort of dusting, getting this sort of quality of cane off on the knife. And what's interesting is that felt like it shut it down more, or maybe it was sitting on the table that shrunk it down more. Sorry, I didn't mean to take it out of screen. Here I am clipping the tiniest bit. Honestly, this reed, I like it so very much, but it still feels a little stuffy to me, so I'm going to experiment. You did, after all, send this to me to see if it could be improved, and so I'm going to see what happens if I just slope the tip a little bit more. And I'm thinking specifically about, I don't know how clearly you can see, but I'm looking at some slope right in there, and even more here on the upper blade, where there's almost just a halo of thickness above the rooftop, as though your rooftop is covered with snow. And I know you're from Texas, so maybe you're not familiar with what that would look like. But what I'm going to do is just go to your rooftop and scoop just the tiniest bit with this sort of almost sculpting motion of my knife. Okay, let's see what that did. That definitely opened up the crow and dropped it a little bit, so I can clip if I want, but for me, that reed now communicates, it plays all the way up and down the instrument in much the same way. There's a slight tightness to this reed. I would love to be able to open up the sound and the volume more. And that keeps, for me, coming back to this region right here. I'd be curious as to what your shape is, or whether there's any chance this is a 46mm tube that's overwound, because there's something just a little constrictive right there that I did not notice on this guy. So that is a thought to think about, I guess. And then finally, we're here with this green reed. Let me dip it one more time. Which, upon first playing, I thought it was terrific. It's got a slightly rougher lower crow. Which to me translates to a huge sound. So, what, I wonder, do you not like about this, if anything? I took a look at it on the plaque. I took a look at it through the light. The slope looks delightful. I really like your really nice tight W scrape down here with a nice strong spine. It's making me feel like I need to go back to a more W, more spiny shape to my reeds. There's still bark on the sides of the heart, but I don't think that bothers me. I think it sounds really good. I think the reed feels really good. So I'm disinclined to work here. Honestly, I'm just admiring of this reed. I would love to know, and maybe I'll send you an email before I send this back. What is it that you want to be different about this reed? Because I quite like it. read. Okay, I hope that this has been helpful. You will let me know if it is not. I'm going to drop these guys back in the mail to you. It's funny with these 2 reads, the crackdown here was a factor certainly, but I felt like your actual biggest issue was the opposite problem on both. That the rooftop up here was cut in a little bit too strongly so that the tip was too thin. That on this guy, the rooftop was cut in a little bit too gradually, so there was too much good stuff in the tip, making it stuffy, whereas this one was chirpy and a little wild. So I think I've tamed them both, working in basically that same area. And this guy I think is just right. What I found so interesting about these reeds is how beautifully similar they looked to the naked eye and to the ruler and to even my glance with the plaque in. She did a beautiful job making 3 reeds that looked very consistent, but they felt really, really different. And I think the lesson here a little bit is, yes, you have to be consistent with your scrape because that's how you make consistent reeds, but you also have to react to the cane you're actually looking at, and you have to react on the fly to what you're seeing. So those 3 reeds looked very similar, but needed slightly different things. And of course, that's always the challenge with making and finishing reeds, right? It's not that hard to construct a reed that looks like a reed, and it's kind of hard to make a reed that really feels great to you. And of course, that's what experience will bring you. This has been a reed repair shop session. You can follow these videos on YouTube. I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, because then you'll always know when I'm putting new episodes up. And I would like to thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.